Dr. Lena Hanson lived in a state of perpetually clean, calculated exhaustion. She hadn't seen the sun rise outside of the lab window in 6 weeks. Her world was the sterile white of Pharmagen Global's research tower and the vibrant, complex molecular structures of Aethel. The drug was her baby, her legacy, a revolutionary treatment for a crippling neurological disorder that promised to change millions of lives. The air in the lab, usually thick with the scent of solvents, was currently charged with intense corporate pressure. The IPO was scheduled for next month. Investors were salivating. The CEO, who had recently fired an entire department for missing a coffee order deadline, was hovering. It was 11:30 p.m. when the final Phase 3 clinical data arrived. Lena pulled the analysis onto her screen, her heart swelling with pride as she read the primary outcome: 96% efficacy. Unprecedented. But her meticulous attention to detail forced her eye down to the fine print, to the adverse events section. There it was, a consistent, low-level signal showing a minor hepatic abnormality, a slight but measurable elevation in liver enzymes in 1.5% of the long-term trial subjects. The abnormality was currently non-lethal, a subtle red flag, but one that demanded deeper investigation. A responsible scientist would order a 6-month delay and another round of testing. Before Lena could even draft her supplemental report, the intercom buzzed. Mr. Thorne, the head of research, requested her presence in his penthouse office. Thorne didn't look up from his massive mahogany desk when she entered. He was the picture of corporate ruthlessness, perfectly tailored and perpetually calm. "Congratulations, Doctor," Thorne said, gesturing to a bottle of vintage champagne he hadn't opened. "You saved us all. Aethel will make us legendary." Lena hesitated. "Sir, the data is phenomenal, but there's a hepatic signal in 1.5%. We need to." Thorne finally looked up, cutting her off with a look colder than liquid nitrogen. "We need to launch, Lena. Delaying for 6 months for a statistical anomaly would bankrupt the company. It would crush the hopes of the millions of people who have already registered for the drug. It would be a crime against progress." He pushed a revised document across the desk. The raw data hadn't been changed, but the analysis section was rephrased. The abnormality was described as a transient, statistically insignificant variance common in initial studies. The risk was subtly masked, swept under the rug. "It's non-lethal, Lena. It is an avoidable delay, not an avoidable mistake," Thorne said, leaning in. "We launch, we save the company, we save the patients, and in Phase 4 we fix this minor issue. I've already set aside the budget. Now sign this. The VP title is waiting." Lena looked at the signature line, then at the champagne, and finally at the vision of the massive, gleaming new laboratory wing she'd been promised. The exhaustion one. The ambition one. The pressure was suffocating. She told herself it was just a small lie, just a deferral of truth. She would fix it. Picking up the pen, Dr. Lena Hanson signed the falsified report. She felt a cold dread settle in her stomach, a feeling that told her she had just made the first and possibly greatest mistake of her professional life. 2 years dissolved into a blinding kaleidoscope of success. Aethel was not just a drug, it was a miracle. It was featured on magazine covers, hailed as a humanitarian achievement, and, most importantly to Pharmagen, it generated billions. Dr. Lena Hanson, now the Vice President of Strategic Research, was celebrated. She bought the sprawling, glass-walled house, accepted the lucrative stock options, and almost managed to forget the nagging chill of that single, signed report. She had tried, of course. For the first 6 months, she subtly pushed the Phase 4 revision that would address the hepatic abnormality. But Mr. Thorne, now the CEO, was a master of evasion. "Minor risks don't warrant interrupting a global triumph, Lena. The numbers are insignificant." She watched the minor abnormality be swallowed by the massive statistical pool of global usage, rendering it mathematically invisible. The small lie was safe, buried deep beneath layers of corporate wealth. Then the silence broke. Lena was scrolling through her financial newsfeed, looking for updates on the new corporate jet, a sick irony, when she saw a tiny piece in a local Pacific Northwest paper. It reported an unusually high cluster of severe bile duct and gallbladder failures among patients with a common neurological disorder in a specific county. The common factor, mentioned almost as an afterthought, was long-term Aethel use. Lena dismissed it immediately. Genetic outlier. Bad luck. Localized issue. But the image of the falsified report kept flashing behind her eyes. Unable to shake the cold feeling, she initiated a private, off-the-books research project, running a hyper-focused chemical simulation on Aethel's core structure. She bypassed company channels, using her old university credentials and a secure, dark lab she had access to. She didn't test Aethel alone. She tested its interaction with compounds commonly found in specific environmental stressors. The results crashed onto her screen with sickening clarity. The hepatic abnormality was not harmless. It was merely a precursor. When Aethel metabolized alongside a common industrial chemical, a cheap anti-corrosion agent widely used in old municipal water pipes, the interaction became cataclysmic, resulting in rapid, untreatable organ failure. Lena stared at the simulation results, the luxurious silence of her VP office suddenly feeling like a tomb. That minor, non-lethal side effect she signed away had turned into a time bomb, activated by the Rust Belt cities and aging infrastructure that relied on outdated municipal services. She had believed Thorne when he called the delay an avoidable mistake. But now, standing amidst the glittering wreckage of her ambition, Lena realized the true horrifying truth. She had armed a weapon that was about to kill thousands, and the disaster was entirely her own avoidable mistake. The catastrophe was no longer confined to small regional papers. It hit the U.S. Midwest with the force of a tidal wave. News anchors were delivering grim reports about an unprecedented wave of juvenile organ failure in cities with aging water infrastructures. The victims were exclusively Aethel users. The language was cautious, possible correlation, further investigation needed, but the pattern was undeniable. Pharmagen's response was swift, coordinated, and sickeningly predictable. Mr. Thorne, the newly minted CEO, appeared on every major network, issuing bland, polished statements. He pointed to the drug's 2 years of success, citing the illness clusters as isolated incidents, likely due to user education deficiencies or unforeseen genetic anomalies. He publicly threatened massive lawsuits against any doctor or analyst who suggested Aethel was the cause. Lena sat in her glass tower office, no longer feeling like a celebrated VP, but a prisoner staring at the instruments of her own execution. She had armed the bomb and now it was detonating. She couldn't keep silent. The moral rot was complete and the human cost was staggering.